Hello everyone, Osiris Frost here. We're deep in the pre-CitizenCon doldrums, and there's not much to talk about. So I wanted to take this opportunity to theorycraft some remedies to some of the long-standing sources of negativity within the community. In my humble view, if CIG took these fixes into account, they would go a long way toward nullifying the rancor and improving the quality of their customer service. So without further ado, here's number 5. Improve the inter-team communication in the ship pipeline. One of the oldest sources of frustration for backers of Star Citizen is the apparent disconnect between the various CIG employees who work on different aspects of a given ship. I'm sure you'll find this familiar. Oftentimes we'll get a concept ship which looks really cool and is said to be suited to a particular type of gameplay. The marketing department will write up some slick copy which, in many cases, outright misrepresents that ship in some important way. Take the current concept ship, the Mercury Star Runner. The sales page talks about how fast the ship is. Certainly, for its intended roles, speed is an important trait for the ship to have. However, at a glance at the ship matrix shows that the actual speed of the Mercury falls somewhere between the Freelancer and the Cutlass, not exactly blowing anyone's doors off. This is because the marketing department doesn't interact with the programmers who are plugging in the actual numeric values for each ship into the engine and tuning that ship to a flight-ready state. It really feels like each team involved in the production pipeline has concern only for its individual piece of the process, and no one bothers to communicate with each other to make sure everyone is on the same page vis-a-vis the actual design. This leads me right into the number 4 issue. It is extremely difficult to select a ship that you know you'll be happy with. Between the nebulous claims from the marketing department, the often outdated design documents which fail to delve into enough detail on the various systems of the game, and the fact that the initial sales pitch for a ship, its subsequent Q&A, and the ship matrix stats almost always contradict one another, many players find themselves in a position where they get hyped on what they want a concept ship to be, only to then end up with some buyer's remorse. Rinse and repeat with each successive concept sale, and lots of backers end up in a cycle where they're always melting or CCUing ships they've burned out on for newer concepts. CIG, in turn, clamp down on buying options over time, as they want to have more reliable metrics on what people will be flying in the verse so they can better direct development priorities, but in doing so inadvertently create a feedback loop where more players are doing everything they can to increase the liquidity of their fleet. I'll tell you right now, the thing that is keeping players from picking their ships and sticking to them is the fact that we just don't know what we can expect from the finished implementation of any game systems. There is a lot of qualitative variety to CIG's design documents. If they would just focus their efforts for the remainder of this year and come out with updated, canonical, and highly detailed overviews of where each profession and gameplay loop was going, I am 100% certain that we would settle into a state of equilibrium with regards to who owned which ships. Backers would be happy and the developers would be happy. Coming in at number 3 is a related issue. So many ships in Star Citizen are only available during limited buying windows. This exists in part to generate hype based on artificial scarcity, but it's also an ill-considered attempt for CIG to tamp down on backers changing the ships they've pledged for the above stated reasons. All ships should be available all of the time. If CIG took my advice to heart about going into minute detail on each aspect of gameplay, they could allow this to happen, and there would be very little turnover, as most of us would have the information needed to be able to make informed decisions about what we wanted to do in the game, and allocate our pledge dollars accordingly. As it is currently, fleet planning relies on a highly strategic approach where you need to stay on top of each concept sale and stack CCUs in your buybacks, just in case it turns out that you end up liking a ship at some future point. The current system isn't serving anyone well, and it needs to change. And speaking of things that need to change, coming in at number 2, the current flight model is a mess. Chris Roberts recently owned up to the fact that the existing flight model wasn't meeting his expectations, and good on him for saying so. What we have now is an FPS-inspired Twitch fest, where the only consideration is how quickly you can snap your reticle to the next target. G-forces have little or no effect on maneuvering, and consequently, Arena Commander consists of players careening nonsensically through space in ways that would cause pilots to black out in real life. It necessitates the kind of absurd thruster values and DPS-driven weaponry that I alluded to in my first point. Chris name-checked The Expanse during his recent RTV discussion on the future of flight. For those not in the know, The Expanse is a science fiction book and TV series that is lauded for its fidelity to Newtonian physics. In The Expanse, space battles happen at long range. Ships can move very fast in a straight line, but the faster they go, the longer it takes them to slow down, and maneuvering at high speeds can cause lethal G-forces. In a game faithfully built upon such a flight model, we'd see much more effective and rewarding turret and missile gameplay, as targets couldn't evade as frenetically as they currently do. Consequently, tactical gameplay would be greatly enhanced, and effective management of shields and ship systems would be rewarded. There would be a reason to have a co-pilot and gunners, where currently it's always better to slave turrets to the pilot. Thankfully, we can expect these changes to happen at some point, even if it's a little ways off. For his part, Chris said that maybe we'd see a work-in-progress demonstration at CitizenCon, and while that's not a guarantee, I suspect that he wouldn't have said that had he not thought of it as a possibility. And finally, the number one thing on the list is the incomplete roadmap. Imagine if you were asking a friend for directions to a place to which you had never been, and in total there were maybe 10 or 12 directions you had to follow, but your friend only gave you the first 4, and after that they strung you along with 1 more every 3 months. It's easy to see how this is not ideal, and it's nice that they've given us insight into what's right in front of us, but surely we can handle some high-level overview of what's further down the road, even if it changes from time to time. In fact, with 500 plus employees, it should probably be somebody's job to keep it as up to date as possible and drill down on the big items whenever it becomes feasible to do so. CIG, we'll excuse changes and even the odd setback if you can just help us envision the finish line. Ditto for Squadron 42, but keeping things too far afield, shrouded in darkness, contributes to mistrust and development fatigue. Even if your best current internal estimate is 2022 for live release, just put it on there so that people can wrap their heads around that and feel like each new patch represents progress toward an end goal rather than a breadcrumb to string us along. And this dovetails in with what I said earlier about fully fleshing out game systems. It's nice that we can expect the Tier 0 implementation of Salvage in 3.5, but then what? Just give us the shape of a plan so we can feel like we're part of the push and not an inconvenience to your development agenda. So that's it for today's episode. What do you think of those changes? And are there other changes that you'd rather see done to improve backer relations? Or do you think everything is hunky-dory as it is? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Until next time, I've been Osiris Frost. Thanks for watching. That's all for today's show. Thanks for watching. If you're new to Star Citizen, or you know someone who's thinking of playing, you or they can earn 5,000 UEC on your account by registering with my referral code, which you can find in the show notes down below. If you have any questions, feedback, or episode suggestions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. And if you haven't already, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.